December 16th, 1944. Schneele Forest, where the Belgian pines lean into Germany and the cold bites like a blade. In the blue-black hour before dawn, Gefreiter Klaus Zimmermann used numb fingers to work a problem that didn't belong on a battlefield. 6 cigarettes, 8 men, and a silence that asked who would go without. Somewhere beyond the trees, American guns spoke in thunder. Somewhere behind him, an officer had promised special rations for the push through the Ardennes, Hitler's last throw of loaded dice. But here, in the frost and the dark, the math was simple and cruel. 6 smokes, 8 mouths. Tomorrow, maybe 5. If a truck found fuel, if the driver dodged fighter bombers, if luck outran hunger. 20 meters away, half hidden under shattered boughs, an American lay where yesterday's fight had ended. When Zimmermann searched the body with the miserable practicality of soldiers at war, his hands found what his mind could not square. 3 full packs of Lucky Strikes, 60 cigarettes, plus chocolate, gum, and instant coffee. The dead man carried more small comforts than Zimmermann's company had seen in months. That discovery felt like a door creaking open to a room no one in his world had imagined, a room called enough. He could not know what stood behind that door. Miles away and oceans behind, factories turning out an arithmetic that left no room for romance. American plants produce cigarettes like rain, roughly 290 billion a year for the armed forces. Hershey, just one company, pushed out chocolate at a pace that sounded like a printing press, something near 24 million bars each week, built to be eaten in mud, under fire, on the march. Numbers are cold until they climb into a pocket. In foxholes and on truck beds, abundance had a flavor and a smell, and men on both sides began to understand that wars are not decided only by guns, but by what a soldier can count on after he fires one. On paper, the German ration system still lived. Regulations drafted in 1939 promised bread, fat, meat when available, cheese or sausage, and, most tellingly, 7 cigarettes or 2 cigars daily. In practice, the ink had outlived the logistics. No more than 6 free cigarettes, the rules insisted, as if rules could conjure tobacco out of bombed warehouses and fuel-starved rail cars. By 1944, 2/3 of Germany's tobacco factories had been turned into something that exploded, not something that glowed at a soldier's lips. Anti-smoking ideologues could make speeches. Quartermasters could not make miracles. Surveys done in the midst of shortage still found most men smoked. The habit had not surrendered, only the supply. Contrast made the lesson obvious. The American K-ration packed 3 meals, about 3,500 calories, plus a small parade of items designed to make misery bend just a little. 4 cigarettes per meal unit, 12 a day, chewing gum, sugar, instant coffee, matches, waterproof packs. The brands read like a roll call: Camel, Chesterfield, Pall Mall, Lucky Strike. And they were fresh and dry when a man needed them to be. When a quartermaster officer wrote in 1944 that such items maintain morale and worked like currency in newly liberated towns, he was not being poetic. He was counting. He was telling the story of a nation that decided comfort was part of combat power. Once you learn to count comfort, you count everything differently. In 1943, American tobacco firms promised production for the troops and kept the promise at scales that felt unreal to anyone living under ration cards. American Tobacco, R.J. Reynolds, Liggett, and Myers, together they flooded the pipeline. Soldiers could buy more at military stores for pocket change, 5 cents a pack, 50 cents a carton, prices that told every private and corporal that the system would not make them beg. Germany, meanwhile, managed something like 40 billion cigarettes across a nation of 80 million civilians and millions in uniform. The Wehrmacht stood in line with its own people, and then it watched America multiply. Chocolate became the quiet symbol that lodged in memory. Hershey designed the D-ration bar to survive heat and rough handling. 4 ounces, 600 calories. A taste intentionally plain so men would eat it for fuel, not dessert. The later tropical bars kept their shape even when summer was trying to melt the world. Add in Mars and Nestlé and a web of candy makers repurposed for war, the output read like a child's dream and a staff officer's victory table. Hershey would eventually crank out billions of bars for the military and win trophies for production. But the soldiers who unwrapped those bars thought about awards even less than they thought about speeches. They thought about having something to bite when everything else felt like sand. Letters and diaries tell it straight. On the Eastern Front, a German private wrote home that they rolled scavenged Soviet tobacco into newspaper because that's what there was. In Italy, a young officer described walking through captured U.S. positions littered with empty wrappers and crushed packs and half-eaten cans, the detritus of an army rich enough to be careless. They throw away more than we receive, he wrote, not a metaphor, an inventory. Another man remembered the shock of stumbling into an abandoned American supply point near Anzio. Stacked crates of K-rations, each with cigarettes and chocolate, more of both than his division had seen in months. For 2 weeks, his unit smoked American brands. Then the crates ran out, and the German allocation returned, if it arrived at all. Men wept. June 1944 delivered the most public proof. When Allied troops crossed the beaches, they brought a logistics machine that did not separate bullets from small mercy. Operation Overlord was not only tanks and shells, it was cigarettes by the millions and chocolate by the hundreds of thousands in the first week alone. Paratrooper bundles burst across Norman fields with radios, ammunition, and cartons. German defenders noticed. Some of them began volunteering for patrols less to find gaps in a line than to find what a dead American carried. It is a hard sentence to write. It was harder to live. From factory to foxhole, the American system moved at a tempo that made German officers grim with admiration. Liberty ships left U.S. ports like clockwork, with holds that could hold both Sherman tanks and cocoa beans. The Red Ball Express, crewed mostly by black American drivers working in segregated units for a country still deciding what kind of democracy it wanted to be, hauled more than 400,000 tons in 81 days, and on record days moved over 12,000 tons. The loads were not embarrassed to sit next to each other. Ammunition beside cigarettes, medical kits beside coffee. A driver later said the quiet part aloud. Quartermasters treated chocolate like bullets because both pushed a unit forward. Winter came with its own accounting. The German December counteroffensive began with surprise and hope and ran into weather, resistance, and math. As German spearheads punched through American lines, they found field kitchens still warm, K-rations still strapped and waiting, coffee still steaming in battered metal pots. There were units that stopped to eat. There were men who stuffed pockets with Lucky Strikes and Hershey bars, who lit American cigarettes in the snow and told themselves, just for a minute, that they were somewhere else. Every delay had a cost. So did every revelation. It's hard to keep believing you'll win when your enemy can lose a truckload of food and comfort and not even flinch. Inside Bastogne, American paratroopers crouched in cellars and woods, surrounded and undersupplied. Except not in the way their besiegers expected. Airdrops brought ammunition and bandages and blankets, but also cigarettes and chocolate. The defenders smoked. The Germans outside counted their last personal ration and made their trades at black market prices that insulted their pay. When surrender finally came for some, it brought a fresh shock. American prisoner of war camps issued rations with cigarettes and chocolate more regularly than frontline German units had received them in 1944. A captured corporal remembered shame giving way to disbelief when a guard apologized that the chocolate was only twice a week. He had not tasted it in 2 years. Civilian memory keeps its own ledgers. In Berlin and Frankfurt and 100 towns with names outsiders don't pronounce well. Children crowded near roads when U.S. trucks rumbled through. Soldiers tossed candy from tailgates. A boy will never forget the day he caught more chocolate in a minute than he had held in his life. A mother will never forget breaking a bar into thin squares and watching a 5-year-old put a sliver on her tongue as if it were mass. After the shooting stopped, U.S. military government sent cigarettes and chocolate into cities as deliberately as it sent regulations and engineers. It was policy, and it was something older than policy, the instinct that you do not rule a hungry people well. Numbers on a page only matter when they touch a nerve. In 1944, American factories built roughly 500,000 trucks, nearly 100,000 aircraft, thousands of tanks, and still found time and raw materials to produce cigarettes by the hundreds of billions and chocolate by the billions of bars. Germany managed only a thin fraction of the heavy steel and a poorer fraction of the small comforts, and much of the latter went to civilian ration cards designed to prop up home front morale that could not be fed by slogans alone. By spring 1945, a U.S. Colonel could offer a German general a cigarette at a surrender table and mean it two ways, a courtesy and a demonstration. "We have enough to share," the gesture said. "What do you have?" Psychologists in uniform took notes. They tested the idea that a man who believed tomorrow would bring a smoke and a square of chocolate fought harder today. The data came back with a human answer. It's easier to go forward when you can count on something small and certain in a world where nothing is certain. Comfort was not weakness. Comfort was a force multiplier. It signaled that a massive impersonal system somehow remembered the person inside the uniform. That signal traveled down supply lines at the speed of delivery. German soldiers understood the signal by its absence. Their system called them to sacrifice, and many answered with grim, astonishing endurance. But sacrifice without relief corrodes. When a private receives 6 cigarettes in theory and 2 in practice, he learns a lesson no poster can fix. When the men facing him have 12 a day and toss a crush pack into the mud without thinking twice, he learns another lesson a different way. "They fight with chocolate in their pockets," one diarist wrote. "We fight with words and hours." Black markets made the contrast measurable. A single American cigarette could trade for 5 German ones. A Hershey bar could buy a chicken. Or, as the war's last months turned surreal, even a dress dagger pulled from a soldier's belt. There is a moment in every conflict when equipment turns into keepsake, and keepsake turns into currency. In ruined towns after long sieges, it happened quickly. There were also ironies sharp enough to cut. American GIs, far from home and tired in their own ways, groused about brand loyalty and ration monotony. A supply sergeant logged complaints that a shipment brought Philip Morris instead of Lucky Strike. He wrote that they burned a couple hundred chocolate bars damaged by water, because the rules said not to distribute them. On the other side of the wire, German prisoners watched the flames and wept. The sergeant noted it and moved on. Replacements would arrive tomorrow. He was not being cruel. He was busy. He was living in a universe of more. Not every lesson in abundance came from a crate. Some came from orders. During the airborne assault across the Rhine in March 1945, American paratroopers were told to carry extra chocolate specifically for German children. Military planners, hard-headed men with checklists and radios, understood that a handful of sweetness at the right time could unclench a street. When those men dropped into fields and roads and farmyards, their candy worked faster than leaflets. Mothers waved them in. Children learned to run toward the sound of American boots. When the Ruhr pocket snapped shut in April, it sealed hundreds of thousands of German troops inside a geography of hunger. Outside the ring, American units stayed on schedule, drawing rations, lighting cigarettes, snapping chocolate in half out of habit. Inside, officers counted ammunition and hope. Negotiations felt like business, but they moved with the gravity of physics. A German general accepted a full pack as if it were a relic. The American across from him stubbed out half-smoked cigarettes every few minutes and lit another without looking at the filter. The ashtray grew heavy. So did the truth. After the surrender and the sorting, after uniforms were turned in and boots lost their mud, the stories people kept were small and precise. A veteran from Normandy said he knew, in his bones, that his country would win the first time he saw what a fallen American carried, as a matter of course. A German mother wrote to her son that a U.S. medic gave her sick daughter medicine and then more chocolate, telling her to eat it slowly. She underlined the word more because she had forgotten what it felt like. An Allied staff assistant recorded that the German delegation at Rams smoked American cigarettes, like drowning men gasping air. They tucked packs into their coats, gray wool stuffed with green and red and white cartons. And somewhere, a classroom in Hamburg, 1950, a teacher asked children what they remembered most about the end. A girl raised her hand and said, "The day chocolate fell from trucks like rain." In a city that had seen fire from the sky, this is what stayed. She was not making a political statement. She was giving history its most honest scale. If all of this sounds like sentiment, listen to the calculators. Take the German promise of 7 cigarettes a day, clip by regulation to 6. To give every soldier just that would have consumed billions yearly, more than the country could produce while feeding a civilian population and arming multiple fronts. America matched that figure every couple of weeks just for uniformed men. Now add chocolate, coffee, gum, sugar, matches, paper, tins. Add trucks to move them, ships to carry the trucks, docks to unload the ships, and the well-drilled humans to make the ballet look inevitable. Add, above all, a national decision that men doing dangerous work deserve small reprieves as part of their kit. This is the moment when a what-if leans forward. What if Germany had managed cigarettes and chocolate at American scales? What if spearheads in December marched without stopping to feast on captured rations? What if every squad leader could tell his men, "Smoke one now, you'll have more tomorrow"? The answer is not that the war flips. There were tanks and planes and oil wells and code breakers and factories. Too many reasons stacked on one side of the balance. But the shape of the fight bends where morale bends. Units hold a little longer, retreat a little less chaotically, accept orders with a little less bitterness. 1,000 small, a little less changes can add up to another month. Another river line held. Another night attack that cost more than it needed to. Comfort does not conquer. Comfort keeps men ready to do the conquering you ask of them. The opposite is also true. Scarcity doesn't merely weaken bodies. It turns belief brittle. When an army cannot keep its promise about the smallest things, it cracks trust in the biggest. A man who unwraps a chocolate bar in a shell hole learns something about his country that no speech can teach. A man who rolls scraps of leaf into newspaper and calls it a cigarette learns something else. Those lessons travel faster than rumor. Zimmerman, in the Schneel Forest, made his division with a mason's precision. He broke 2 cigarettes, then another 2, coughing as he laughed at the futility. 6 sticks of tobacco into 8 equal shares. He pocketed the lucky strikes from the American, not as loot, but as evidence. Later, when he lit one in secret, the taste of Virginia tobacco and cellophane and a match that flared exactly when struck did not feel like indulgence. It felt like a message. "This is what they can afford," it said. "This is what we cannot." He and men like him would see that same message written 100 ways. On a paratrooper's harness in a hedgerow. On a Red Ball Express driver's log that measured days by tons delivered and roads cleared. In a POW camp where a guard apologized for the lack of dessert. In a mother's kitchen where a bar snapped into 5 thin pieces and made everyone at the table cry. In a surrender room heavy with smoke that didn't taste like ersatz anything. The war ended as wars do, with paperwork and photographs and exhausted people walking home. But its final lesson for the soldiers who lived the arithmetic did not sit in museums or binders. It fit in a pocket. It crinkled. It melted on the tongue. It glowed in the dark when 2 hands shielded the flame. It said, over and over, that victory belongs not only to those who can build bombers, but also to those who can fill a ration box with a little bit of home, reliably, predictably, endlessly. That is why the memory refuses to fade. The dead American in the pines with 60 cigarettes and candy, the German private dividing 6 among 8, the way a single taste of sweetness could make a man remember he was a person first and a uniform second. And it is why a child in 1950 called it chocolate rain. She wasn't wrong. That day, for the first time in years, the sky did not deliver fear. It delivered proof that somewhere far away, a factory had decided she mattered. If you want to understand December 16th, 1944, do not start with a map. Start with a pocket. Count what's in it. Count what isn't. Then listen to everything those small numbers are trying to tell you.